If this doesn't save,
It's live. It's live. Oh God, it's good. This is a. All right, so I'm running Manjaro Budgie. Um, it's a it's pretty great, Ricky. I love this distro. It's
yeah,
not quite my favorite distro because
yeah,
there's one that I've found that's like really great. It's called Solus Budgie.
yeah.
It's a little it's like a mix between GNOME and KDE, in that it has the stability of GNOME, which
Yeah.
and the customizability of KDE. Because
Oh, that
KDE,
sounds pretty good.
so you remember how I was going on and on about KDE when I was trying it the other day?
Yeah, yeah.
And the problem is it's just not stable. It's not. There's so many bugs, and it's not. It wasn't just Kubuntu either.
Yeah,
KDE on Fedora was just as bad. I don't
yeah,
know. A lot of people like that. I mean, there's just so much you can do with KDE, but it's just so buggy.
yeah.
Um, so I tried Solus Budgie, and uh, it's just so good. And this is Manjaro. It's my first attempt at Arch Linux, which is one of the more difficult to
Yeah, I've
install.
heard about that, but I still haven't tried it yet. I don't know.
It's regular Arch Linux is installed completely through the command line, which
Yeah.
I wasn't quite confident enough to try, um, mainly because I figured I'd just fuck it all up. Um, but but Manjaro and Antigros both have GUI installers, so it wasn't quite too
Oh,
bad.
okay.
Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so this I have this brand new Dell laptop that came with Windows on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I went through and I completely deleted Windows on it and put. I think I started off with Ubuntu
Mm-hmm.
because it has a UEFI booter, the UEFI.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah,
It's
yeah.
really terrible, like security software that they put on your hard drive, so it makes it hard to boot from USB keys. Um, so I had to turn off that and go back to the legacy boot mode.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I put on Ubuntu, right? And then I went to
Yeah.
another distro and another distro, and I found one that I just didn't like. So I was like, I'm gonna take this back to Windows and see if I can't finally figure out how to dual boot on a UEFI system.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
uh, Turns out I can't reinstall Windows at all. Uh, so when I formatted the hard drive, I changed the type of partition to something that
Oh, okay,
Windows doesn't
okay.
support. Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and I haven't been able to figure out how to change it back to the
Yeah.
more specific, because in order to change it back to the one that Windows supports, I have to have UEFI back on,
Yeah.
which means that I can't boot from a
Can't you just
Windows key.
Oh, okay.
Um,
So I was
it's
gonna say, can't you just set it in the BIOS to UEFI and then it would tell
Well,
you that
yeah,
it's
but then
gonna
I can't.
format the disk?
Right. But the problem is, in order to get back to a place where, so if I turned on
Yeah, yeah.
UEFI, I'd have to be able to boot from a USB key in order to format the
Yeah, you
hard
still
drive.
can. You
I
still
haven't been able to
can.
figure out how. How?
Really? Because we've got a couple machines here that are UEFI and I've booted from
So,
USB.
like, I figured out how to get to a boot menu, but when
Yeah,
UEFI is on, it won't read anything from
yeah.
a
Yeah,
USB
you
key.
have to look in the BIOS because you said you have a Dell machine, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure if you go into the BIOS, even if it's in UEFI, there's somewhere I can't remember where it might be under like the boot options, like boot order or something. You can specify like
Right,
to
but
have a
this machine for some reason
USB.
turns off. So once UEFI is turned back on,
Yeah,
it disables everything having to do with legacy. So it turns off boot order, it turns off
yeah,
the boot mode or boot
yeah,
menu. So I
yeah,
can't get in there and change any of that stuff. I don't know. I've been
yeah,
googling it. It's not a big deal because my main
yeah,
desktop is back to Windows, um,
yeah.
which was a pain in the ass because I had
Just
to start
keep it
out.
Linux.
Well, no, see, my main desktop, I'm dual booting. I have
Yeah.
Ubuntu
Oh,
Budgie
okay.
on there and Windows. The
Yeah.
problem is I can't not have some Windows.
Yeah.
And we can blame Adobe for that. I use Photoshop, I use Audition, I use Premiere,
Oh,
and
okay.
I don't care what any of the Linux fanboys say. There's just nothing on Linux that
That is
compares to Adobe
comparable.
Audition.
Yeah.
And okay, so so I asked a few people that I follow on Twitter who are big Linux guys,
Mm-hmm.
that is there an audio editing program on Linux that is similar to Premiere? And their response was Audacity.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have you seen Audacity recently, Ricky?
Yeah. Oh, not recently.
You
But
want to know what? It still looks the same as the last time you saw it because it looks like it was developed in 1995. Actually, I wouldn't be surprised if it looks exactly as it looked when it was developed, maybe for Windows 3.1. It's terrible. I'd actually be better off editing audio in the command line terminal. I wonder if there's a way to do that. Like, I know you can, like, I saw a web browser in a terminal the other day. Like, it's all text.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that too.
Like W3M. It's like, I don't think I want that. I'm a nerd. I'm just not quite that much of a nerd. Okay, so in case you haven't noticed, we've actually started the podcast. This is
But I mean, this ties in nicely to our topic, anyways. So
yeah. So I don't really have an intro for this podcast, Ricky. Normally I'd say, "Hey, everybody, welcome to the Linux podcast." I'm so sick of doing that, so I just decided we just start talking. I'm Matthew Weber. That's Ricky Williams. We're started. Today's topic is why hasn't Linux gone mainstream? And I have some really good answers for this, Ricky. And I'm going to come out right now and say that one of the reasons why is because every Linux distro has this terrifying way of installing and booting. At some point, it shows you scrolling text, right? And every once in a while, you'll see the word fail or error, and it just scares the living daylights out of you. Because like, what do you mean error? I mean, did you delete all my information? I mean, if Windows did that, people would be going terrified. It'd be like showing the blue screen of death every time your computer booted up.
Yeah.
And now, obviously, that's not the main reason because you actually have to try Linux in order to be terrified by the scrolling black screen of text. But if you're, say you were interested in Linux, but you're not really a techno guy, and you got into there and you finally got, you're installing Ubuntu and you see the scrolling list of text in a command line, I can just feel, I mean, it scares the crap out of me every time I turn my computer on and I see the scrolling text or whatever. And, sometimes you have those brackets with the green OK in the middle. You know what I'm talking about? And then you see one that says failed. Like, what? Like, does that mean my computer's never going to turn on again? Is my computer going to explode? It scares the shit out of me. So that's one of the reasons why I think it hasn't gone mainstream. So that and choice. All right. So there's all right. So do you remember back when we were like probably Tech Weekly on the other podcast, Ricky? And I made a metaphor about spaghetti sauce. So I mean, this just has to be 5 years ago. I mean, it's ages and ages ago, and that's how. I mean, we've been doing a podcast together for 7 years, almost 8 years.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so I know it's insane. So obviously this one's newer, but on the other podcast, we went through a whole bunch of different iterations. But it's kind of shocking that at least 5 years ago I was still talking about spaghetti sauce. It was around the same time that I got into Heavy Rain. I was always talking about Heavy Rain. Anyways, I think one of the reasons why Linux hasn't gone mainstream is kind of like salad dressing. If you go into or cereal is another good example, metaphor of this. You go into the grocery store, you walk into the salad dressing aisle, and what do you see? You see 50,000 different kinds of ranch dressing.
Mm-hmm.
Which is the best one? You don't know.
Yeah.
So what do you end up doing? You end up going with the one that's the cheapest,
Yeah.
or the one that you know is the most popular.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it's the best, but there's just so many different choices. And Linux is kind of like that. Now, in the last month since our last episode, I have tried approximately 10 different distros. Seems like every day. Yesterday, I installed Manjaro, which is what I'm using now, and I'm very, very impressed so far with the stability. I mean, we're recording a podcast on Linux, something that we didn't think we were going to be able to do because, at least me, because I'm an idiot, so I wasn't able to figure it out. But I figured it out. Manjaro is a distribution based on Arch Linux, which is one of the more difficult and more, complex Linux distros. But I've also installed Ubuntu Budgie. I've installed Kubuntu, regular Ubuntu, Ubuntu GNOME. I've installed Solus Budgie. I think I might have already said that. I installed Fedora KDE. I installed Fedora GNOME. This is all within the last month. And see, all right. So another thing about my personality is, Ricky, when we were running a tech blog, remember how I changed the theme
every week?
That's what Linux has become to me.
Yeah.
I can't settle on one because each one has these awesome different features. Like I really enjoy this Manjaro Budgie, but it's not quite as customizable as Solaris Budgie or Solus Budgie.
Yeah.
You can't add panels. You can't edit the panels that are already there. It doesn't come pre-set up, so you can put icons on the desktop. Even it's more like GNOME in that. So I've had a hard time. I think one of the reasons why it hasn't gone mainstream is there's so many different choices. How are you supposed to pick the right one? And even if you go on YouTube or Google or whatever and say best YouTube distros, I mean, you're going to come up with a list of the same ones. I mean, everyone's going to say Ubuntu or most of them
mainstream ones.
Yeah, they're going to choose Ubuntu or they're going to Mint Cinnamon. I've seen that a lot. Yeah. I mean, they're not going to tell you to install Arch right away because Arch is you get completely command line installer. But I mean, there's just so many different opinions as to what's the best. There's so many different ways to install it. It's just so confusing for the regular beginning. I mean, if I tried to tell my mom how to install Linux, she'd look at me like I was a moron. Because there's no way she'd leave Windows. I mean, I tried it. There was a cloud-based Linux called Jolly or something like that. And it was basically Chrome OS before Chrome OS was really good.
Yeah.
It was just a browser and web apps. And this is perfect for my mother because that's all she does is use Chrome. I mean, she doesn't leave it ever. She hated it. She despised it. I mean, literally, it was the same UI that she deals with every day, but the startup was different because there was these big gigantic buttons for menus and it looked different. She hated it, and I think that's, I mean, for the vast majority of people who use Windows and Mac, they're so used to that one way of doing things.
Yeah,
and even if they considered switching, it was just too much choice. So what about you, Ricky? Why do you think?
Okay,
Linux hasn't gone mainstream?
I've got a whole bunch of things. Okay, so when I consider mainstream, I think of Windows and Mac OS. Okay, so now if you compare it to those two, at one point it was cheaper because Linux is free. So compared to Windows, where you're shelling out $150 to $300 for an upgrade, while free is cheaper. And Mac used to cost some money. I think it was like $20 or something like that. But now, but now Mac is free. But the thing, even still, that you're contending with Linux, why it still has a good thing to it, is that Linux works on all types of hardware. Whereas Mac, you get up into the higher OSs, it starts dropping off the bottom end hardware. Which, that's just how it works. You're adding features and, the lower end hardware can't take it. Whereas Linux, you can load it on all this older hardware. That's what has always been known about Linux. Now, like you, when I decided to try Linux, I bought a new Dell laptop. I wiped Windows out and I installed Ubuntu. I also wanted to install Kali because the whole point that got me into Linux was that I'm studying penetration testing. Um, so the thing for me, when I look at how I've installed it and stuff, like when you say mainstream, you're talking about users who are, they're not technically savvy per se. Like not all of them. There's a wide range. The thing is, so first you consider the hardware. I bought a brand new Dell laptop. So you're thinking brand new. It's got like 16 gigs of RAM, nice new processor, the monitor's nice. This should be great. Okay, I load up Ubuntu. Well, the Wi-Fi doesn't work because the driver is different than the stock driver that comes with Ubuntu. So now I had to go online and look up how to fix this. Well, for some people where they only have one computer, the Wi-Fi doesn't work. Now they don't have online capability. Now they got to go out to the library, to a friend or whatever, come back. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so right off the bat, you're talking about you can't even just buy a Dell laptop or run into the store and buy a Toshiba laptop, load this thing up, and it's going to work. You know what I mean? That's one strike there. There is a manufacturer, System 76, and they produce laptops specifically for Linux. Everything works, all the drivers are there. But you're talking about $3,000 and up. Like
Yeah,
there's
they're
no,
pricey.
yeah, there's no $1,000 laptop. You know what I mean? Like you can't compare it to Dell. So that's that. Then you move on to the software side of things. Okay, Windows. This is where Linux used to be okay because, back in the day with Sushi and Fedora, you used to be able to get it on a disk. Okay, now things have, no one does disks anymore, not even Windows. The problem is Windows. You download a thing, put it on the USB, boom, that's all she wrote. Mac, you don't even need, you just hit your option key and the Mac automatically knows, as long as it has an internet connection, it will download the OS and install it. You don't even need a USB key. Linux, I tried. I had a USB key. I downloaded the ISO. I should have been set. How do I get the ISO onto the USB key? Because it's not understanding. I had to Google. I had to figure out that in the terminal you have to put in these commands that will format the key in a file system that Linux understands, and then the ISO will be written to it. Like, who in mainstream is gonna know to do all that? On top of that, I wrecked like two USBs because while writing, I don't know if the write was too fast or too slow or the file system, or I wrote, because I did a couple different distros, maybe I wrote too many, whatever. Then I went and I had Ubuntu. It was on my machine. I said, okay, now I want to deal with Kali. I did it one way. That didn't work. I had to go to the forum. I had to write. On the forum, no one else knew how to do it. I ended up trying it. I installed Ubuntu fresh, and then I installed Kali, whereas before I was installing Kali and then Ubuntu, and I had to format the hard drive in a specific way where I divided it in half so that, Ubuntu would see its half, and then Kali would see the empty space. Like, when you're talking about mainstream, these are all things that make it will never make mainstream. I think if Linux distros, like the famous ones like Ubuntu, Mint, Fedora, if they were to, put the ISO image onto USBs, that they do, and you go to the site and it says, hey, just put in your address and we will ship you the USB key. All you have to do is pay for shipping and it will be there in a day. a lot of people, rather than the 3 days it would take them to look up this info online and format their USB key, they would do it, and that would go a lot further. But I think until they start getting drivers together where you can just buy any laptop or desktop from any manufacturer, toss Linux on, and everything's good, that's going to hamper them. You're talking about also things like, hey, I got this Dell, I loaded up Linux, and then, a BIOS update came out. And, Linux forums say, hey, this BIOS update is great. Now, a whole bunch of things work, but the BIOS doesn't flash in Linux. Now you got to figure out, how the hell am I going to flash this laptop? Like for me, when I had the first Dell laptop, I took the hard drive with Windows out completely. I put in a totally new hard drive. My reasoning is, if I didn't like Linux or whatever, I could just swap the old hard drive back in. No muss, no fuss. So how did I end up flashing the BIOS after trying a million and one things? Put the old hard drive in, boot it into Windows, flash the BIOS, switch back to my Linux disk. They've got things like Wine, so you can run exe for programs and stuff. You brought up a good point. Like you're looking for a replacement for Photoshop. Well, there's GIMP. Hey, I know Photoshop like a boss. And I can honestly say GIMP, I was barely able to figure out how to crop and do stuff. Like, Photoshop to a beginner has a huge curve. So if I can master that, sure, I could sit down for a month or two and probably figure GIMP out. But if you're coming from Windows or something and you want a replacement, like, you don't want to sit down for a month and figure out how to use GIMP. You know what I mean?
Yeah, GIMP is terrible. I mean, people sing its praises because it's free, and it's open source, and it's great. And while those things are fantastic attributes for something to have, it doesn't automatically make it good.
Yep.
Now, I understand. Trust me, if I could find an alternative to Photoshop on Windows or Linux that was free, I would jump at it for a second, because I mean, it's $60 a month. I mean, that's an atrocious amount of money to pay for any software, especially when you're not using it for something that makes you money.
Makes you money, yeah.
So, I mean, it's an expense that doesn't really make sense, but there's just nothing out there that compares. GIMP just doesn't do it. Now, on the Mac side, at least, there's a lot of Mac software that compares to it. There's guy went totally blank.
Well, there's Intensify, which is
right, and then there's that.
There's also, what is it?
There's also like Pixelmate or Pixel.
Yeah, Pixelmator. That's it.
Pixelmator, yeah, like that's. I mean, it's not as powerful as Photoshop, but it looks good. It's easy to figure out, So Mac is a lot easier to find something that's alternative to the Adobe products. Where Windows is just not that thing, and on Linux, it's not even close. I mean, when you're talking about finding an audio editing program, and they point you towards Audacity, and now like I said, it's open source or whatever. It's it's stable and it does work. It has all the features of Adobe Audition. It's just not as that the UI is not as friendly. It's not as well designed. It's not polished. It looks old and it feels old. It feels like it was designed in the 1990s, and that's the thing, is that it was designed in the 1990s. So, I mean, I don't know. So there's a couple things you talked about, Ricky, that I want to talk about. First of all, you're absolutely right about the drivers. Although I haven't had any problems with Wi-Fi drivers, graphics card drivers and display drivers is just, I mean, it's not a good situation on Linux.
Oh yes, I can attest to that.
It's just not. I mean, because you have NVIDIA drivers and graphics drivers, and then you have open source versions of those drivers that don't really work. So if you're on older hardware and you're lucky to find a driver that does work, chances are it's just not really going to be very good. So especially, and you really notice when your display driver doesn't work very well when you're scrolling on a web page and it looks like it's tearing. And it happens often, especially on older versions, on older computers, you know. So like I have this, my main desktop is about 12 years old. But it has some upgrades, you know, it still has the original processor. But, you know, it has 16 gigabytes of RAM, and I went through and, you know, I have a fairly reasonable standalone graphics card with 2 gigabytes of VRAM. You know, so it's, you know, it's not like a top of the line gamer's graphics card, but then this computer can't handle that, so I mean, I can't really, you know, expect it to. But it should work just fine. But on some of the Linux distros that I've tried, the tearing is just terrible. And then that's an older hard drive. On this brand new Dell, I installed. I can't remember what. I've tried so many distros in the last month. I can't really remember which was, but one of it was. I mean, this is a brand new Dell. It has integrated Intel graphics, so it's not, you know, any special graphics card or anything. You know, you think it's going to work just fine. You know, no. I mean, sure, the screen turned on, but the scrolling was terrible. You know, you try to move a window around, like, you know, click and drag or whatever, and it's like you're living it's like you're trying to run server software on a Raspberry Pi, you know, first generation. It's not good. I don't know, that driver situation, it can just really be bad. And you know that. And then go ahead, Ricky. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and then the other thing too, just to add to that, so, you know, with Linux, yes, you have great communities and you can find the answers on forums and stuff. But the thing is that all these threads that are out there, that have been out there for years, who cleans them up? No one does. So, you know, if you're looking for information, you're finding old-ass information.
It might not work.
Try it. Yeah, and it doesn't work. And then you find new information, and you find newer information. It's like, yeah, that information is there, but there's so much that you don't know. So you just end up trying all of them, and it, you know what I mean? So
yeah, that's what I found is, for some of the things that I've gotten stuck on, is YouTube has actually been a better place for me to get information than forums.
Oh, okay.
But, mainly because there's so YouTube does a better job of burying really old information.
Yes.
So they put the newer stuff at the top, because it's Google, right? They want you to see the newer stuff that people actually are still going to get paid for. You know, because you know, the older stuff, chances are people still aren't, you know, maintaining their AdSense accounts or whatever. So, you know, the newer stuff's at the top, and that's where I get a lot of my information. Like so pretty much every distro has the ability to theme the windows. So like GNOME and Budgie use GTK for themes, and like I think, and then there's like the Unity tweak tool for Ubuntu. There's the GNOME tweak tool for Budgie and GNOME. I can't remember what, I think Fedora uses those as well. So I mean, you can go through and theme your windows, but if you want to download themes from the internet, installing those is not actually all that easy. You know, you think that there'd be like a button in the appearance menu or whatever where you can install from a file, like, but there's right. But there's specifically in KDE, there's not. They took it away. It's no longer there. In GNOME-based environments, the way you have to do it is through the terminal by moving it from your downloads folder into user/share/themes or user/share/icons. So I mean, you have to be familiar with. So this brings me to the biggest point of the day, Ricky. I think terminal really is the problem. For it really is the bottleneck. Past the drivers. I mean, if we can overlook the drivers problem, it's the necessity of being able to learn at least basic functionality in terminal that's going to prevent most people from using Linux, because there's still things that you have to use terminal to do. You know, whether it's installing certain programs like Spotify. Spotify doesn't have Spotify's available for pretty much any Linux distro you want, but you can't just download it, install it like you could on Windows. You have to get into Terminal and you use apt-get or EO package or whatever distro you're using and get it through the terminal. Same thing with Chrome. A lot of times Chrome you can't just install if you're not using Ubuntu or OpenSUSE or Fedora. If you're using some other distro, you have to do it through terminal. I mean, all of these are very, very popular applications. I mean, yeah, you can get Chromium. I use Chromium just because it's basically identical to Chrome, and you actually get so it's perfectly fine, but there's no really alternative to Spotify. Same thing with the Plex Media Server, which I haven't been able to get to work that well on my main desktop, which is another thing that's preventing me from moving to Windows, or moving from Windows. So I mean, if you have to learn Terminal, nobody's saying you have to go in and you have to become an expert at Terminal, but you have to know the basics to install things and move things around.
Yeah.
And most people aren't willing to do that. They want a GUI. And that's just the way it's always going to be, I think. Most people just are never going to learn. I mean, for us nerds, using the terminal is awesome. I mean, we love getting the terminal and learning commands and shit. For my mother, and she would probably shoot me if I tried to get her to use the terminal. It'd be justified too, because I mean, you shouldn't have, in this day and age, if you're wanting to be mainstream, you shouldn't have to go back to MS-DOS. And I mean, can you imagine where Windows would be right now if in order to install a program you had to open up the command line or MS-DOS like it was in Windows 90, XP or whatever? I mean, nobody would ever install a program. Those programs would never exist. It has to be a GUI. And that's the biggest problem. So, anything else to say on this, Ricky, before we move to the picks of the week?
No, I think we've pretty much covered it. All
right. So, my pick of the week is Plank. Now, when Ricky took a look at this, he messaged me and asked me, "What the fuck is Plank?" And I'm surprised you don't know Plank, Ricky. Plank is a dock, like Mac OS dock.
Oh, okay.
That's what Plank is.
Yeah, I know. Isn't there one called Docker or something like that?
I believe there is. There's also a new one that so in the next main version of Ubuntu, when they go to GNOME, they're going to be creating a dock out of something called Latte, I think.
Oh, okay.
It's brand new.
Yeah.
I really want to try that, but it's only available right now for KDE and Plasma. But anyway, because frankly, I will say this.
You know what? Yeah, you just brought up another good point too, which I forgot, is the upgrade. Like right now, I'm on Ubuntu 16.4, I think. And like Windows, Mac, when it's upgrade time, you just do the upgrade. It upgrades your machine. All your files are there, just like normal. But in Linux, like, I mean, I'm not a Linux head, an old Linux hat, so maybe I'm thinking about it wrong, but it feels like every time there's a new one, it's like either you don't upgrade, so you just stay on the distro you have, or if you upgrade, it's like back everything up, wipe everything, install, and then restore.
Yeah.
Go ahead. You reminded me of that.
Just along those lines, there are some Linux distros that are rolling releases, like I think OpenSUSE is one.
Yeah.
And those don't come out in major versions. Those you just update and just keep going. But you're right, in Ubuntu, it doesn't seem that that's the case. Anyway, so Plank, obviously, it's free. It's good. I think it's the best dock out there right now that's available across distros. But it's not very customizable. So, like, there's no easy way if you have multiple monitors to put it on both monitors. You can do it, but you have to be comfortable with the command line. And I haven't been quite comfortable enough to do it because I don't want to ruin my whole computer. But I'm getting a little bit more comfortable. It's also I mean, it has the regular functions, like you put it on different sides of the screen. You can pretty much put like a trash icon there. one thing that really bothers me that you can't do is put an application launcher in there. So like, there's no icon in any of the distros that I found that use Plank for me to put an icon there that would launch like
launch it.
A launcher or an application menu or something like that. Now, GNOME doesn't use Plank, but they have, and same thing with Ubuntu. They don't use Plank. They have a little icon that will bring up the launcher. But if you're just installing this on your own, there doesn't seem to be a way to do that, and that really bothers me. So there, I mean, there's some problems with it, but it's really nice. It reminds me a lot. It makes me feel like I'm making my own Macintosh. It's kind of great. But it's free software, so it's kind of good. All right, so Ricky, why don't you tell us about your pick of the week?
So my pick of the week is Telegram, which we've been using for last little while here. So I use an iPhone primarily. iOS is great. The thing I love about iOS is the fact that it's on multiple platforms, as in I have it on my Mac, and I have it on my iPad, and I have it on my iPhone, which makes it easy because any device I'm using.
I think you meant iMessage, not iOS.
Oh, sorry, iMessage, yes. Where that you guys message me, I'll get it. So we've tried different messengers in the past, like Slack and a couple of others. Can't remember the names.
WhatsApp
and the thing,
the
thing I didn't like is that they were very restricted to the platforms, and that's why I love Telegram, because it's available for iOS, Android, Mac OS, Windows, and fucking Linux.
Yeah,
like
Linux,
when I saw that, I was like, holy shit. Like, Apple needs to buy these guys and just roll iMessage into this so that it would be everywhere.
Yep.
Oh, would be so awesome.
It would be good. It would be really good. And along with that, they can buy Plex and get rid of fucking iTunes. While we're having these dreams, great. Obviously not going to happen though, because they like their little
lock-in.
Yeah, it's terrible. Bring iMessage to Android, or here's an idea, Ricky. They could stop deleting my shit on iOS, so I won't have to switch to Android the next time I get a phone.
They just hate you with that.
They do. It's terrible. I mean, they keep deleting my pictures and my contact information. It's just.
Well, you want to know the funny thing? I know when I tell you this, you're gonna start laughing, but I'm actually considering buying Google Wi-Fi to install in my house.
Google Wi-Fi, like as in the internet service, or the
router?
The
router, the little.
Oh,
router.
right.
I know how much I love Google, right?
Yeah.
But
don't you use like an Airport Express right now?
I do. I use an Airport Extreme and an Express, but they're old. Like,
well, yeah, and Apple's not gonna.
They're not doing anything, right? So the thing is, I could buy the last Airport Extreme, which is 1 year old, newer than mine, which costs over like almost $200, I think.
Yeah.
Or I could buy a Google Wi-Fi, which just came out. It's a mesh router, so I could buy multiple, and it only costs $180.
Yeah.
So you know what I mean. And the thing is, like, in terms of routers, you think security, because there was the whole problem with, I think it was D-Link or Asus or Netgear or something, where their routers are all fucked, right? Like, they have like the security hole. With Google, I mean, Google is a top dog like Apple, right? Like, if their routers, like, it would be all over the internet, right? Like, they would have major cake in their face, you know what I mean? So you kind of know that they're going to be updating it, and like Apple, the router will pick up the update itself rather than you going and downloading this bin file and then go in, and you know what I mean. So yeah, I cannot believe I'm saying that, but that's what I'm looking at.
So I use an old Netgear router, and the reason why I use this Netgear router is because it has previous to that we used like D-Link, and then we used like Linksys before that.
Yeah.
But like every year and a half or so, it would just die.
Mm-hmm.
Because they were cheap.
Mhm.
So we got this Netgear router, and it has a lifetime warranty on it. So
Oh, okay.
I have a hard time getting rid of it because, like, you want to know what? It dies. I contact Netgear. I get a new one.
You
It's
get a
great.
new.
Um, Now, granted, I really do want the look into the Google one because I
Mhm.
had a Wi-Fi or an Apple router a long
Yeah.
time ago. But see, I think the Google one would actually work better for me because it's probably
Mhm.
more suited towards Windows.
Yeah.
So like Apple, you can go through and do a lot of stuff on the Apple routers on Windows because they have the
Mhm.
software or whatever, but it
Yeah.
doesn't feel as native to it as it would like on a Mac.
On a Mac, yeah.
And I
Well,
have
see,
no Macs,
yeah.
so
Well, see, that's the thing. That's the only thing that's keeping me from getting the Google Wi-Fi, which I have to look into, because I've seen that that everything I've seen says the setup is very dumbed down. Like you can't go in and set like I'm just throwing it out. I don't know. I haven't seen the setup. I'm just trying to give an example. The example may not be true, but for instance, if you wanted to go in and set up a Mac filter, like I've seen not specifically that reference, but like the interface is not that advanced where you can go in and configure different things and put yourself on a different subnet and stuff like that. So that's the only thing that's, I'm kind of thinking, whether I want to do it.
yeah. All right, so that is it for us this week. 40, or actually, hold on a second. We do want to talk about the sketch for a little while because Ricky was an idiot
Yeah,
and
I
had
had
another
kids.
had another child. I don't know what the hell he was thinking because I mean he had the first one and he was like really busy, and he decided to do it again. I don't understand. They make contraception for a reason, Ricky. I don't know what your problem is. Obviously, I'm one of those people who will never expand the human race, and for good reason. They don't want more of me wandering around. But anyways, Ricky's really busy, so we've kind of moved the Linux cast from twice a month to just once a month, and it will be posted at the end of every month. So that's the reason why you're only seeing one episode a month. This is August's episode,
Mhm.
and it should be posted by the 31st or so. I just wanted to let you all know that that's the reason why you're not getting weekly updates.
So they
Because
can all write into me.
so it's Ricky's fault. You can contact him at or with one on Twitter. If you email at the linuxcast.com, I will pass that along. All of your hate and death threats, we'll pass that right along to Ricky. I'm at MTWB on Twitter. The Linux Cast is at the Linux Cast. And coming up on our next episode, Ricky, I have an assignment for you. You're going to install Manjaro Budgie, and
Yeah,
you're
that's
going
no
to use
problem.
it for a little while.
Yeah, no problem.
I don't care if it's in a virtual machine. It doesn't have to be
Hmm.
on hardware.
No, I got a fresh hard drive I can install.
That's you have a whole month to do it. Do
Yep.
it at the beginning of the month and then use it for a little while. That's what we're going to talk about next time is Manjaro,
Yeah.
but Manjaro Budgie. And that will be our September episode, and we will see you then.
All right. Sounds good. Hope you guys enjoyed.